Welcome to Healthy Chats with the Docs with Dr. Brooke Leverone. And today we're going to be talking about professional supplements and what's the difference between professional supplements and over the counter. All right. So with that, Dr. Brooke Leverone.
Hello. So professional supplements, I think this is a really important topic, and I always tell my patients how important it is to choose an appropriate supplement. And the part of the reason is that the supplement industry is not regulated like some other industries are. It's not a food, it's not a drug, so supplements aren't controlled by the FDA. And because of that, you can have so many different companies putting out whatever they want and claiming whatever they want on the shelf, and there's nobody sort of doing the checks and balances on whether or not that product is a good product or whether it's doing what it actually says it's doing. So to understand that, first of all, is important. So you don't just want to go and pick up any Kirkland brand Costco supplement or any other supplement at maybe your local pharmacy, because it's probably not actually being regulated to do what it says that it does. So there are organizations that do certify supplements and do help with this regulation. So while there's not this sort of national regulatory board like the FDA, there are organizations that are third-party organizations that do check supplements for quality and purity of the product, making sure that it has what it says it has in it, at the dosage it says it has in it, without any additional contaminants, and that it lasts up to a certain expiration date. So it, 1 or 2 years out, it still has those same concentration of nutrients in them. So there are third-party organizations that do check and monitor that and certify supplement companies with that. And that's what you want to look for. Because if you don't have somebody checking, then, you could be getting sawdust and cornmeal, and no wonder they don't work, right? And this is also part of the problem, because there's all this debate on, do supplements really work, and do they actually do anything, and maybe they're not good for you. Well, it's because there's a lot of crap out there, and so people are taking these products that don't actually have the vitamin C in them, or don't actually have the good form of B12 and at the right dosage in them. And so if you aren't taking those things and, taking these good healthy products, and you're just buying, cornmeal and sawdust, then of course you're not going to feel the difference, and you're not going to get any better. And there's going to be reports that they say these things don't work. So you want to look for supplements that have the certification that clarifies that they do have what they say they have at the dosage that they have. This is called GMP. This is good manufacturing practices. This is the highest level of quality control certification that you can get on a supplement. And this is what you want to look for if you're purchasing a supplement on your own without a physician. Now, those of us who work in the supplement world and functional medicine world, and we're providing supplements to patients, this is one of our criteria when we're selecting a company that we work with. And most of those high-end companies only sell through practitioners. They don't sell over the counter because they're high-end therapeutic levels of supplements. So they only work through the practitioner to be able to provide them to patients for therapeutic reasons. So most of the time you can only get some of these supplements through your providers, but if you're ever out on your own looking at supplements, you want to make sure they have that GMP, good manufacturing practices certification, because that's the highest certification you can get for quality control and purity of the products that you're purchasing.
All right, so GMP, good manufacturing practices.
Yes.
Does that have anything to do with the FDA?
No, it does not. So the supplements are not a food and they're not a drug. So they don't fall under the jurisdiction of the FDA. And that's part of the challenge, is that they aren't FDA approved because they're not a food and they're not a drug. So it gets a little bit confusing because people are like, well, doesn't it have to be, FDA approved? Like, it's not FDA approved. So 2 things on that. One thing is the FDA thinks that pesticides are perfectly safe. So you can take that at what you will. So what they are approving may not necessarily be in our best interest anyway,
right.
But the supplements don't fall under their jurisdiction. So they're not responsible for approving it or monitoring it.
So there's a couple of things. So the FDA doesn't have anything to do with supplements. So the good manufacturing processes are really, really important. Is there a government agency that overlooks or manages the GMP, or is there a group that overlooks the supplements, or is it just a standard manufacturing process?
You know what? That's actually a good question. I actually need to look that one up because the GMP is a system for ensuring that products are consistently produced and controlled according to quality standards.
Mm-hmm.
And this is, to my understanding, a non-government agency, but I need to double check that because I'm actually not.
That'd be good. We'll update that. Well, some of the questions, I mean, so there's one thing about manufacturing a supplement. There's another thing about, you hear a lot about, well, it's not bioavailable. Well, what does bioavailable mean?
Right. So bioavailable means how readily do you absorb this supplement in your system?
Mm-hmm.
And there's multiple different reasons why something can be bioavailable. So when you're taking a supplement and you want to be able to make sure that you're actually getting it in, right? That it's not just going right through you. Now,
Right.
no matter what supplement you take, you're not going to absorb 100% if you're taking an oral supplement. It just you're not, and that's okay. You're getting more than if you didn't take it, right?
Right. Right.
But you want to make sure that you absorb as much of it as possible, and that basically means how bioavailable is it? How biologically available is it to your body to be able to uptake through the intestines into your cells and then actually get into the cells and do what they need to do. And this is going to be different for every product out there because certain ones are fat soluble, and so they need to be in a phospholipid form for better transport across the membrane. Certain nutrients need to be bound to different carrier molecules to be able to be transported across the membrane more readily. So for example, magnesium comes in a lot of different forms, and the different forms will have different function. So like magnesium oxalate is the chemical compound or the molecular structure that is bound to the magnesium that has to be bound to a carrier group. So magnesium oxalate isn't readily absorbed across the intestines into your system, but it stays locally in the intestines to help relax the intestines for supporting with bowel function. But a magnesium glycinate, so glycinate being the bound carrier, helps to transport it across the intestines into the bloodstream, so you can get benefits of magnesium for muscle relaxation, sleep, and mood support. So that's another piece of, whether or not something's bioavailable is how it's transported and what it's bound to in order to be transported across the intestinal lining. So when you're these are some of the things that we look at when we're picking supplements. So as professionals, we look at that. We're trying to, somebody who's maybe not a nutritional supplement specialist, and that's not their area, they may not know something as simple as magnesium oxalate versus magnesium glycinate, for example. I mean, it's just a small one, right? And so they'll just be like, oh, just go buy magnesium, get whatever magnesium you want, right? So those of us who do work in the functional world and do a lot of nutritional supplementation, this is kind of one of the things that we look at with the companies that we investigate, right? We're always like, okay, well, what's the form that the nutrient is in? Is it lipid bound? What's its carrier group? Those types of things. And most of these supplement companies that we use as professionals have studies on their products. So this is another difference, right? So not only do they have the good manufacturing practice certification, but they also have studies on their own products in most cases that show that it's getting into the bloodstream, that's elevating blood levels. And you're just generic everyday over the counter stuff. They're just putting stuff in a capsule and putting it on the shelf and collecting a buck, right? But the people who make the professional grade supplements are actually doing and granted, I know before you guys jump on me about it, I get that they're doing their own research and so it's biased, but at least they're doing some research, right? So in some cases, it's actually some companies, I'm hesitating on mentioning names because I don't want to put benefit somebody or whatever, be biased in that way. But some companies, for example, bergamont's a citrus fruit that has been shown in clinical trials to help lower cholesterol levels. Oops, I lost epigenetics on my IG, but we still got you over here. So they'll be back. I'll keep answering that question. So bergamot, for example, has been shown in clinical trials to help lower cholesterol.
Mhm.
So some of the companies that I work with will take the source of bergamot from those clinical trials at the doses those clinical trials used, and then put that into their supplement for a cholesterol lowering supplement. Again, your generic over-the-counter supplements are not going to be doing that. They're like, oh, bergamot, sure, I'll just pick up whatever closely related bergamot supplement and put it in my product and put it on the shelf. But a lot of these companies are not only doing their own studies on their product specifically, but they're taking research on specific ingredients that has been done and then utilizing those exact ingredients and exact dosages in their products to achieve a beneficial effect, where you're not going to get that same sort of benefit from a generic over-the-counter product.
Well, and one of the best examples, we work with one of the largest health systems in the country, and I call it the 1 versus 60. So one of the things that we found that I found alarming was the #1 over-the-counter probiotic supplement. What compared to a professional brand, no names,
Yeah.
but a brand I know, and I know, you would have to take 60 of the over-the-counter probiotics to get the same benefit of just one of the professional brands. So I see that it's like 1 versus 60. So that is huge. I mean, that's a significant thing. So is that because of the formulation and the way that it's one thing to do the good manufacturing practices, of course. It's another thing to make sure that you have the formulation right with the bioavailability. What would explain the 1 versus 60 besides the manufacturing?
In terms of the probiotics specifically?
Yeah, as an example.
Okay. So I was answering someone's question on the chat. So I need to,
Yes.
so I apologize. I need to make sure that I understood your question appropriately.
Go ahead and answer, because thank you, Joseph. That was great that you did that.
Yeah. So for those of you who may be listening and didn't see, one of the participants on today's call, who was actually, my IG just went dead. See, the technical stuff. Sorry if I lost you there for a minute. For those of you who don't know, just to go back a step, and so GMP has been around for a while. So, part of my practice for years has been, okay, this GMP, I know that they are the good manufacturing practices, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But somebody else just contributed that the FDA is now offering CGMP declarations. So I do need to look into that a little bit more, but there you go, you guys. There is an FDA involvement in the CGMP declarations currently. That is actually news to me. So, this is why we do these things, right? So we can all learn from each other. So then going back to your question, they were saying that so part of the reason why you have, professional grade versus over-the-counter products, and seeing that we have strength that is higher in the professional grade versus the over-the-counter products, is because it's more expensive, first of all, to put, because you have to get therapeutic levels. So there's a couple of things going on. Is that you have to get therapeutic levels of whatever the ingredient is in order to have a benefit from it, right? So that, for one, means that you're going to be in higher concentrations in the pill, and that's going to cost more. And so a lot of your over-the-counter products probably aren't at the highest concentration. The other factor is the purity of the quality of the product as well, too. So in the example of probiotics, there is probiotics are live bacteria. They have to be alive. So you have to make sure that whatever you're collecting to encapsulate is alive to begin with. And then you have to make sure that however you are encapsulating it and storing it is going to preserve them. So probiotics are a perfect example, because if the probiotic is sitting on the shelf and isn't appropriately encapsulated and isn't refrigerated either, then those probiotics are going to die, and then they're not going to do you any good, right? So we need to make sure that not only are we getting good quality products at high enough therapeutic dosages, but they're actually packaged and encapsulated for preservation of an integrity of the product. And that kind of goes back to the GMP, where they're testing the product after it's been on the shelf for a while. And, does it still have what it says on the label, is that actually existing inside the capsule? And so that's part of, what the certification does, is make sure that those products are actually getting that level of quality at those higher doses. So you've got the quality of the product itself, the concentration of the product itself, and the integrity of the product in the packaging and storage of that product as well too.
Yeah, and so you could have good manufacturing practices, but if you're, and that could have nothing to do with the concentration, the formula, and the dosage application, because you could be doing all of the manufacturing correctly, but
Right.
still some of the therapeutic levels in the strength of the formulas and those types
Right.
of things might not be there. So
Right.
just because somebody has GMP doesn't mean necessarily it's a professional grade supplement.
Right. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So there's a lot of other things that go into that, like we were talking about before, is that if you're going to go out and buy it on your own, the GMP is a good place to start. But when a lot of the products that we use as professionals, they take that extra step, and that's why they're doing their GMP, and they're doing the other supplementate, they're doing the research, they're double checking their products, nothing goes out, the companies that we use take the extra step, which, it sucks because yes, they cost a little bit more, but you get what you pay for, you know what I mean? So
but they work.
but they work, exactly. And again, this is why we have so much confusion, I think, in the public around, so much confusion out in the public around, are these, what are supplements working? Do they actually do anything? Because when you see these articles and you see these research papers that come out saying that supplements don't do anything, they're a lot of times either they're retrospective studies that aren't controlling all the data, first of all.
Right.
Second of all, they're looking at people who are purchasing generic over-the-counter supplements that don't have any quality control. So these products that we use as professionals have quality control, have good manufacturing practices. They're doing research on the product, whether it's in-house or they're extrapolating from research that's been done on the ingredients at the right dosages, and, they're packaging and distributing the products appropriately as well too. That's why a lot of these just supplement companies, they won't back up a product. Like if you go and you buy, because you can find a lot of stuff on Amazon. We all know that, right? So if you go and you buy a product off Amazon, a professional grade product off Amazon, the company will not stand behind that product that you purchase on Amazon, because they don't know what has happened to that bot, because they don't sell on Amazon. That's not their normal venue. It's the other people who are just got a hold of it and are selling it. But they can't guarantee that the product was stored right or that it hasn't been tampered with. And so they can't guarantee the efficacy of their product if you're buying it from somewhere like Amazon, which is why all these companies, like, you have to buy it direct for your practitioner, because we know that it's coming straight from the warehouse to the practitioner, and it's been controlled in terms of their packaging and storage, etc., that all also have an effect on the product.
Yeah, that's a good point, because a lot of supplement companies won't even, professional supplement companies won't sell if you have an online store, for example, because of counterfeiting and diversion, right, with Amazon. So there's also, with graphics today, it's really easy to make a product look like it's a product, but it's not really. And or diversion, meaning that they're buying products from one source and reselling it on another source. And because of all the things that you talked about, you're really wasting your money if you do that, because if it's not a solid product, it's not going to provide the benefit that you want, and you just wasted your money. Is that probably the best way of describing it?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, it's just so hard, because I feel like it's hard. I mean, this is why we're doing what we're doing. This is why we're doing these live chats, you guys, because we want to give you guys information and resources to be able to make good choices. And, because you're out there, because I feel like, we're all out there, we're all trying to be healthy, we're all trying to do what we can. And there's so much information out there, and there's so much misinformation out there, and it can be really confusing. And, you go to the drugstore and you go to Sprouts or wherever your local health food store, Whole Foods, etc., and you're relying on the minimum wage worker that works there to give you advice on your supplements, or just whatever you read online, and you're picking up whatever you're picking up. I know and it's because you're trying to make an effort to, like, oh, I should take fish oils, Which, by the way, fish oils, you really need to make sure you're getting a good product on fish oils, because if you go out to dinner and order fish, you want to make sure that it's fresh and, sustainably caught and all these things, right? That's the same thing with your fish oil, guys. Please don't buy the cheap fish oil, because you're just buying old fish. Like,
nobody wants an old fish.
Where you might not think about it, right? Because you're going out and you're just trying to do what's right. So unfortunately, a lot of those over-the-counter products aren't really ideal. So you do want to follow, professionals and functional medicine specialists who work in this world. The professional level products, they are, for all the reasons that we have talked about. There's a reason we use them. They are therapeutic. They do have a benefit because they're researched and they're controlled in all these different ways that your general over-the-counter products just aren't. And that's why people aren't getting maybe benefits. And there's all this bad reporting on supplements, because the over-the-counter stuff is just.
Well, we're nearing the time, so let me summarize.
Fumbling through our technical difficulties. I want to jump in real quick. About the GMP. So thank you, Yusuf, for pointing this out. It's one of those things where you get into your routine as a practitioner, you're like GMP, and sometimes you miss details as they change over the years. So it looks like a couple years ago, the FDA started working with the GMP declaration. So if you guys are curious more about that, you can go to the fda.gov. You can just Google FDA and GCM or FDA and CGMP, and it'll take you to an article about the CGMP declarations and the FDA's involvement with that and how they help regulate that. So that'll give anybody who's interested and wants to know a little bit more some resources to check out for that as well too.
Great. So CGMP is a great place to start. So that's kind of foundational. If it's a no, don't take it. If it's a yes, keep going, right? And what you really want to do is ideally get a professional brand because of the therapeutic levels, the strengths, the concentration, the quality and purity of the ingredients. And the formulation of the ingredients to make sure they're bioavailable and they're not counteracting to each other.
Yeah, exactly. And storage.
And the storage and packaging, right?
Yeah, exactly. And we didn't talk about the purity, but a lot of these other supplement companies put fillers in there, you guys, by the way. So this certification makes sure that there's only what's on the label in the product.
Right.
And, a lot of these other, I was half joking when I said sawdust and cornmeal, but a lot of these over-the-counter products fill it with cornmeal. So especially if you have a corn allergy, that's not really a good idea. So there are a lot of impurities in the over-the-counter stuff when there isn't that regulation and quality control.
So don't waste your money. Listen to your doctor.
It really is a waste. Sorry, I know you're trying, guys, but
I know.
You got to step it up a little bit.
Well, you end up saving money in the long run. Let's put it that way, because
this is true. Yeah, this is true. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, you get what you pay for. All right, Doc. Well, thank you again. We so much appreciate you.
Yeah, thanks, guys. Always fun. So I hope you guys are good on Instagram, and I'll talk to you guys soon.
All right, stay safe. Wear your mask.
Stay safe, everybody. Bye. So, guys, I hope you caught all of that on Instagram, because